Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is a quick sort of update on some progress and in one case quite a surprise, although I was warned. Let's look at that one first. One of the what I called little Cattleya seedlings that came out of the big box, I was assured that one of them was probably blooming size. Now, when I got that, it didn't have many roots. It has put on some good roots now, and yeah, and a new growth. And guess what's down in the new growth? That highly looks like a spike. I don't even think it looks like a sheath. So, the lady was right. That is a true miniature, and it is blooming size. There's a bit of a giveaway in the name, really. Cattleya Little Lemon Drops. Crossed with this is the funny one, it's crossed with an Encyclia Vetulina. This is going to be really interesting with a name like Little, yes. Lemon Drops should have some yellow, and what the other one is, I haven't got a clue. But an influence will be there. And you know, I've got a feeling that, yeah, down in that one where the leaves don't seem to have widened up properly, although that does seem to be a bit of a trait on this one. It's a bifoliate that doesn't spread the leaves wide, and that does seem to be a trait in it. But yeah, that one with the closed thing's definitely got something in it. Could be a spike, could be a blind sheath, we'll have to wait and see. But that certainly looks like a spike, straight out of the apex. We'll have to wait and see, but yeah, I mean, that was unexpected. That really was unexpected. But as I said, I did have a warning that that this was a true miniature. Anyway, so we got that one to come, hopefully, as long as it doesn't blast or do anything silly. It should be okay. That's that one. My Dracula. This is Dracula Bella. This is a bit of a nuisance to get out because I've had to hang it. The spike on this is progressing quite well now, and it looks like a bud is forming. Now, I've never had a Dracula bloom before, so I haven't seen how they progress, you know, from a little shoot out, in this case, the side of the pot, and then a pendulous spike. There'll only be a single bloom on the end, but as Dracula blooms go, this is quite a biggie. As such, there's still quite a lot of developing to do, but it does look like the bud is now forming, so probably the spike won't get too much longer. This became a nuisance to water because my other Draculas are in a tray, which looking down is dry at the moment, needs some water in there. But that's something I have noticed since I came back from my break in Ireland with Rachel. Obviously everything got a good water at that point, and the pots are taking a lot longer to dry already. Yeah, I mean, these pots haven't been watered for a while. They're still moist in places, to some extent that if I did go round and water today, some would have to be missed out. You know, I mean, there's still quite a bit of water in some of these pots. They're still quite moist. So my watering frequency is already dropping off, and that will be a consequence of the shorter days. If you think of, you know, a plant that's actually growing and using up the moisture in a 15-16 hour day is just going to use an awful lot less in a 12-hour day because it hasn't got so much daylight when it's active. They don't tend to do much when it gets dark. So, you know, that's it's a benefit in some ways. But, you know, it does sort of get the mind thinking that, you know, winter's not too far away. Another very cold night again last night. That's 3 in a row. If we get too many more, what did we get down to last night? 14 again. Let me reset that because I want to see if this is starting to increase. We're supposed to be getting a little bit warmer with nights not quite so chilly as the week goes on. But I always say let's wait and see because the weather people can be wrong, sometimes miles off. But they do their best, I'm sure. It's all computer projections and stuff. There's no real people doing it, I'm sure. The big Vanda spike up there, that's a lot of blooms on there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, possibly 12 blooms on that. That's going to be a hell of a spike. The old clothes pegs are weighing it down to stop it getting up near the roof, and literally the weight of the buds increases quite dramatically as they swell up, until a point where the clothes pegs can come off and it'll hold itself down under its own weight. I don't want it touching the roof, basically, and I can't really lower the plant because there's nowhere else for it to go. The one with that has the large white blooms, the spike on that is now progressing towards the roof. So the old clothes pegs can come off of that spike and go on this one for a while, just to get this one down. The one with the large purple blooms has always had more blooms per spike than the white one. And the white one this time is probably only going to get, excuse me, 3 or 4 blooms, but we'll have to wait and see. I'd like to say it's a nice splash of colour, but it's not. It's virtually white with a very pale grey tessellation pattern, which makes the petals and sepals very attractive, otherwise it will just be plain white. And it does have a deep purple lip, but that lip is very small, as is the trait on most Vandas. The lips are not large, they are quite small. So that's the Vandas. The one that has the orange blooms on the spikes pushing up round the back here, that does have a lot of blooms per spike, but that's got... it's effectively an Ascocentrum, I think they were, which was a Vanda crossed with an Ascocenda in its day, but the Ascocendas have been reclassified as Vandas now, so effectively Ascocentrum has disappeared. It no longer exists. It's a Vanda crossed with a Vanda, so it's nothing more than a Vanda hybrid now. So we've lost that name. That one seems to have gone forever, unless they have another think and bring something else back with a totally different name that we can't pronounce, as is their way. The only other spike that's lurking somewhere is a Cattleya. Let's see if I can get it down. And the buds are forming on this now, so yeah, the spike on that's coming on quite nicely. It's not going to have a huge number of blooms looking at it. Looks like 4, maybe 5. But this one does have a branching nature, and although it's got no tag on it at the moment, that actually went to the Malvern show when it was in bloom, and unfortunately there is a nasty habit of your tags going missing when they go to our shows, because every plant gets its brand new tag written by a guy with beautiful handwriting. We use green tags with white sort of scroll-like writing on, so it's a uniform look to the whole display. So anybody else's tags get put to one side and often just don't reappear, so I'll have to re-tag that. But that one's called something like Golden Sunray Sunrise, I think it is, so it'll be a nice orange and yellow combination. It was in bloom a long time last time. It's growing on well, chucked out loads of roots this year and has some new growth, so progressing nicely. That's to come soon, but not in the immediate future. The buds will take a while to swell. Am I going to get that up there without dropping it on the floor? It's the trouble with working left-handed when you're right-handed, but the camera needs to stay in my right hand. I've tried left-handed filming before, and half the time you don't even get to see what I'm talking about. The old left hand don't work so good. The Arangis is now effectively in its full glory. All the spikes are now open, and so far the first spike to open was this one on the left. It's dropped 1 bloom, but I think that was more of a bud blast than the spike going over, if you see what I mean, because the rest of the blooms still look good. So all the spikes are open now. There's just 1 bud left to go at the base of that one. And I'm quite interested to see how long these blooms actually last this time. I mean, I updated my notes when the first spike opened on the first day, so I've got the start point, and the length of the blooms on this plant will be based on when that first spike goes over, not when the whole plant finishes, if you see what I mean. That will be a false impression. I mean, if you think about it, if the spikes were 3 weeks apart, you know, I could actually have this down as like a 7-week blooming, but each bloom doesn't last 7 weeks. And I'll be highly surprised if I get a month out of it. Arangis are not long-lived, but not ridiculously short. and some are longer lived than others. But this is a delicate Arangis bloom. I mean, some of the blooms are much larger than this. And this has hints of a bronzy pink colour, because most Arangis are not pure white. Some are, but a lot of them have a tinge of some sort, and it can be anything from green is quite common, greeny tinge, a bronzy tinge, a fawny coloured tinge, orange, pink, but a lot of them have a little tinge somewhere, and this one's got like an orangey, bronzy colour tinge just near the base of the plant. So it just adds a little bit of subtlety to it, which is good. I've had some people asking about Elvis. Big deal with Elvis, really. He's a wanderer by nature, and the thought of keeping him indoors and restricting his access to the outside is not on. You know, as a 13-year-old cat, that would be really unfair and probably upset him quite a bit if he came to the back door and wasn't allowed out. I mean, he's got his own cat flap. Well, they both have, there's two of them. But effectively, I went away to Rachel's on the Thursday. My daughter came down on the Wednesday evening and stayed while I was away. And the last she saw of him was that Saturday. He went off in the afternoon and just didn't come back. And I ended up putting flyers around the estate with pictures of him, you know, explaining that you know, he's not a young cat, description of him, and if you've taken him in your house with the best of intentions, thinking he's lost or astray, please kick him out and send him home. And if you're feeding him, it would probably be better, although again well-meaning, to stop, at which point hopefully he'd come home for some food. Anyway, he was missing for 9 days, and I had a phone call a couple of days ago to actually say somebody'd seen him on somebody's doorstep next to an empty food bowl, and they'd gone out for a cycle ride, and he was there when they went out on their bikes, and he was still there when they came back. So he's obviously expecting to get fed at that house at some point, and he was a long way from home, 2 roads away basically, and yeah, very worrying time. I went round, and he almost didn't recognise me. He was quite fretful, you know, wide-eyed, tail flicking and everything, but I think he did eventually recognise me because he came up and did all the purring stuff and everything. I managed to carry him home, and quite honestly he's been in virtually ever since. He now seems incredibly reluctant to go out apart from essential duties, and he's spending a lot of time just eating and sleeping now, and he seems to have settled down again. Now, he could have been chased, you know, dog not on a lead, fox, another cat. He could have just been chased so far that, you know, at the end of that chase he looked round and just didn't recognise anything about where he was and became lost, and has spent a long time trying to find his way back. So anyway, he's sort of back now and he's settled down, but very worrying time. You know, when it gets to 9 days, I mean, quite honestly, I'd given up. I thought he's gone this time. But anyway, he's back, and he seems to have settled down. There's lots of purring going on, and, you know, he's back to his old sort of friendly self. I mean, he could have got upset that I was missing. He's used to me being around. I'm never away for more than, like, part of a day, if you see what I mean. And even though he knows my daughter really well, he could have just thought he'd been abandoned or something and gone off. But anyway, he's back now. He's very, very thin. He obviously hasn't had much food. Consequently, he's eating like a pig. But I'm all for that at the moment. You know, he can have as much as he likes. But yeah, he's back. As I say, he's always been a little bit of a wanderer, but never for any length of time. And I've done a bit of work on the internet, and it is possible for cats to get a form of dementia where they actually just wander off and look round and think, I don't know where I am, when in fact they're in a place that they've been before. So, you know, he is getting on a bit, although he's not a really old cat, but maybe he's having a little bit of memory loss and just forgets where he is and can't find his way home. Anyway, that's an Elvis update. Worrying time though, very worrying. As far as today's concerned, there's very little to do out here. I'm going to have a look at my the cooler growers, as I call them, but these are basically plants that should not dry out, not to any extent. And I do notice there are some blooms on the Restrepias, so they've recovered from their heat stress now and have started to bloom. Mind you, there's only one really that I can see without getting them all out, which I'm not doing yet. Oh, I can see some buds on other plants as well. So the Restrepias seem to be coming back to life, shall we say. I mean, nothing died in that heat, which I am a bit surprised. That was quite stressful for things like Masdevallias and Restrepias, because firstly, they don't like the heat, and secondly, in my environment, I was having real trouble keeping the humidity up, which is the only real way to get away with heat, is to still keep that humidity as high as possible. But to keep the temperature down, the old extractor fan was sucking out the heat, and away went the humidity with it. And when the outside temperature is over 30 degrees, there was just no way of cooling it down in here. I mean, the circulating fans were up near gale force to try and, you know, keep the leaves cool by just moving the air. And I did my best, but it's been a hard year. It's definitely been a hard year. Many other growers have said that, they've had Cattleyas where, you know, they're regular bloomers and they matured their growths and just had a blind sheath. And that's unusual because that's a plant that doesn't mind the heat. But, you know, it's environmental circumstances. It's although some plants don't mind the heat, a dramatic environmental change upsets the plants. It gives them a little bit of a setback. And that can go either way. You know, plants that are meant to stay warm that just get a sudden chill, it doesn't do them any good. And vice versa, plants that are used to a nice steady 26 to 28 degrees that suddenly get 32, 33, prolonged over a long period as well. At the point where our day lengths were at their longest, that's got to be stress, it's got to be. I mean, they say that most orchids are not happy above 28 degrees C. Some are, there are true warm growers. Well, I haven't got any of those as such. Everything in here is mainly intermediate, and some cooler growers, which just about hang in there. They're not in their perfect world, but they manage. So I'll leave it at that for today, because I've got other stuff to do that's not orchid related. It builds up if you forget, and then suddenly you look at your mental list of things you needed to have done in a certain week, and you find you've got none of them done. But your orchids are well looked after. That's just how it goes sometimes. There are a few other buds lurking around, but they're not developed enough to have a good look at. I might just be able to get, I can't get it out now, but right up the back there near the window, see if I can point the camera, one of the little mounted Phalaenopsis is just about to open. I left the previous spike on, that's the one, I can't really get at it, the one at the back anyway, the one to the rear, and it does look like it's going to branch. But it's produced another spike with some buds on, one of which is going to open soon. And that's a very delicate little Phalaenopsis. It's quite unusual in its colouring. Certainly not a shouty loud one. It's a very delicate bloom. But we'll have a look at that in a day or two when it opens. A closer look, I mean. Another bit of news. I've had an email from somebody from the Cornwall Orchid Society, who's actually coming to our show on Saturday. That's a long way to come for an orchid show. But this particular person's been in contact with the person I spoke to when I visited Burnham's back in the summer and chatted about Deesas. And this guy, hopefully, is going to bring me some Deesas to our show. They've been repotted, so all I got to do is keep them alive. But that should give me a variety of colours, because at the moment all three potfuls of Deesas are effectively the same plant, which is Deesa cuensis, which is an attractive bloom, but it's pink. Yeah, so I'd like a yellow and an orange and a red. I don't need thousands of Deesas because they do multiply at quite a phenomenal rate, and they'll take over the place in time. But yeah, so hopefully on Saturday I might get some more Deesas. Well, that'll be good, because that's what I'm really after, is a selection of colours. not thousands of plants, a selection of colours. And we'll see how those grow on and see what they do next year. Hopefully they'll be blooming size. But with Deces, they're fast growers. The little young plants that have pushed out the side of these these 5 in fact. And again, if you look at these 3, that was 3 single plants. And now it's becoming quite a little potful. They do multiply quickly, yeah? Some quicker than others and can form a huge clump in just one season. So they do multiply at quite a rate. So if you grow Deces and they grow pretty well, expect to have quite a lot in a very short space of time. Wish some of the other orchids would do that. Oh, there was another, what else did I see yesterday? Yes, the tiny twinkle has a spike. First of what will probably be many. But yeah, first spike on the tiny twinkle. I've got 3. This is tiny twinkle, which is basically white. I've got the cinnamon one, which we looked at not that long ago, and that's probably got half a dozen or more spikes on it now, so that will probably be the first to bloom. And I've got a yellow one, which has got no spikes at the moment. But anyway, yeah, we're a tiny twinkle, so it's a miniature, because twinkle's quite a small oncidium, but that's a miniature version of it, hence the name. The videos on the Dendrobium seem to be going down very well, and I'm hoping are helpful. I will keep them coming, but at the moment we're only going into autumn, so the rate of change is not going to be that fast. So they're not going to be hugely frequent, but as things change, I'll pick up on them and show what's changing. The thing that seems to be a bit confusing for some people is what is a terminal leaf? How do you know when a cane has reached a terminal leaf? And I'll get some examples together in the next video that hopefully makes that clear. Because I've been growing them for ages, to me it's blatantly obvious, but it might not be for everybody, so I'll try and give some good examples of that, because that's quite an important state of play. Certainly with the resting types, because once the canes reach that terminal growing point, they're not going to grow anymore. Yeah, so that's the time you need to get in there and start making your changes heading in towards winter. So we'll pick up on that as we go along. And that's about it for today. Bit of a chatty one. People are still incredibly surprised that Hibiki is still in bloom. You're not the only one, so am I. When I got that, I had no idea how long those blooms were going to last. The first clusters to open were back here. Now they're obviously going now, yeah. So they were the first. This was amongst the second ones, and I'll show you this. The rest of the clusters were in underneath a bit, see if I can get it out, and they didn't make it. I think they just got blasted by the heat. They didn't develop to any great extent. But what we do have is something emerging from near the base of that cane. Now, given its position, it's highly likely to be a bud, and without the heat, hopefully it'll develop and open up properly. It could be a new growth, because these do form kikis, even though they're quite close to the base. They are technically kikis. But if that's a bud, that'll extend its blooming even more, and who knows, without the heat it might even last longer than the ones we've got. But that's been in bloom a hell of a long time. I have no other Dendrobiums anywhere close to that one. The next thing stepping back from that is the Latoria types, and they are notoriously long-lived blooms. And that seems to be across the board. You know, looking at other people's videos and the names of their plants, many and varied, they all seem to be very long-lasting. And some of them, like this one, this is Nora Tokunaga crossed with Aberrans, are quite compact plants and can still produce a good spike. Yeah? So, yeah, not all Dendrobiums are giants, you know, far from it. Some are a bit nice compact plants that can occupy a relatively small amount of space. But Latorias are notoriously long-lived blooms, and I think well worth the effort. They're not difficult to grow. They don't need any nonsense with the rest or anything like that. They're continuous growers, don't like to get cold, so they need a constant reasonable temperature throughout the year and plenty of water and feed in the growing season, which is the equivalent to their wet season. They then go into a drier season. So they do need to be a bit drier in the winter, but it's not a true rest, and it's certainly not any shape or form a dormancy. So don't let anybody fool you into that. But they do need to stay a bit drier in the winter because they don't grow so much. Now that could be a trait of Roger's grow room because it cools down here, yeah, and being in the UK, much shorter days. So that might be why mine slow down. Whereas in a more suitable environment without that cooler temperature and shorter days, they may grow throughout the year, and I suspect they might. But in their natural environment, they would get a drier winter. They just don't get the low temperatures. So very easy to grow, quite honestly, and well worth having. But some of them do get pretty big. You know, don't take that as a classic example. That is quite a small one, quite a compact plant. Some of them are 3 foot, 3 foot tall, and can grow into a huge bush. You know, once they get a hold and start taking off, they can really push on. So, choose carefully if you're short on space, basically, because some of them are monsters, which is good if you've got the room for that sort of thing. Right, I'll leave it at that. Quick look at this one, because I think it's going to fall off in a couple of days. That's Miltonia Queen Anne, and it's funny actually, the last bloom is staying a lot longer than any of the other blooms, and again, that's probably because it's cooler. And the other Miltonia, Cattleya, I'll get it in a minute, only 2 blooms on that, but they seem to be lasting quite well. Tolumnias vary. Some of these can be quite short-lived, but by short-lived I mean like 3 weeks. And compared with some others, that's not that short. But some of them, the blooms can last 5 or 6 weeks, so they do vary. They vary quite a bit, in fact. That's about it. I don't think there's anything else lurking that's spiking. There's certainly nothing else imminent. But I'm suspecting in the not too distant future, some of the Paphiopedilums might be thinking about pushing a bud out the centre. It's coming to the sort of time of year. The ones I've got always seem to have bloomed in the winter time, and the 2 that bloomed last year in the winter were in the house, and it knocked their blooms down so quickly compared with normal, so they're not going in the house this year. It's just the dry air, it's not that good for the blooms, and they weren't getting a chill down at night. Now, although they don't need a proper chill, most orchids do better if they get a difference between the day and the night temperatures. It doesn't have to be huge, but they recommend a minimum of 4 or 5 degrees change between day and night, centigrade obviously. I don't do that old F stuff. I've basically forgotten Fahrenheit, even though I grew up with it, because I've been using centigrade for long enough now. I've forgotten the equivalents of the Fahrenheit. The only one that sticks in my mind, I believe, is 20 degrees C is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. But I don't use it anymore, so I don't worry about it. So that's it for today. It looks like it's going to be another sunny day. So although I'm getting the cool nights, this is the 3rd consecutive sunny day where the heat's built up during the day, and I've got up to that 26 to 28 mark. Foggers kick in, everything's nice and comfortable, but I'd prefer it not to be getting quite so cold at night at the moment, and it's not even October yet. Now, come on you guys, get this weather sorted out, and then we'll see where we go from there, and I'll see you next time. It looks good. This is the dark bit, the sun hasn't got here yet, and you can see it's a uniform light. It's still reasonable light. I wouldn't say it's good light, but it's reasonable. But as soon as that sun gets round, the whole place just lights up. And for me, it just feels nice when this happens. But I have noticed the old sun is getting lower in the sky. And yesterday, I did notice that for part of the day, it's ducking in behind that tree. and the shadow of the tree was 2/3 of the way up this side. So that's stopping the sun coming in through that end for about an hour and a half now, which I could do without. Oh, there's Elvis sat out in the sun. Can you see him through the... can you see him? Possibly. But he's... See, that's his favourite place, that corner. He also gets up on the staging when the sun's there. So he is outside, but he's not showing any signs of stress or anything. But I'm pleased that he's starting to venture out again, because he's a bit worrying. But he'll have a sit in the sunshine, which he likes to do. And I can pop out there every now and again. I think he needs to know I'm around. I think, you know, when he first came back, he just had that very fretful look about him that everything in his world was wrong. And he's wide-eyed all the time and furtively looking round. He didn't even seem to recognise the house, even though he's lived here for 11 years. He just seemed fretful, as though his whole world was messed up. Which, if he'd been lost for that length of time, you know, that's pretty grim for an animal to try and cope with. But hopefully he'll settle down and make himself at home. You know, I mean, he is basically, although he wanders a bit, he does spend most of his time in and around the house. When the weather's good and the sun's out, he sits in the garden, has a snooze, and you know, and usually spends part of the day in the house, part of the day in the garden. But going missing for 9 days was not good. It's difficult to cope with, as any of you that have had similar problems would know. Doesn't need explaining, it's just difficult. Anyway, back up and running now, and I'll see you next time. Obviously the show on Saturday, although I won't be spending a whole lot of time there, it's my brother-in-law's 60th birthday party in the evening of the same day. So I won't be spending like the whole day at the show. I've got to go and get Hannah in the morning, so we won't get to the show till sort of probably early afternoon. And spend an amount of time there, chat to some people, have a look at the plants, do some filming. I'll try and do my best to film the show, as I usually do. And then we've got the party in the evening. So... yeah, coming soon. And a couple of weeks after that is the Wessex Orchid Society show, which I'll obviously go to, and film again. I've just got a feeling that both of these shows are going to be a bit thin on the ground with the old blooms. You know, if people have had similar troubles to me. I think the only people that probably got away with that heat wave in the UK are people that grow in the house, because their houses probably stayed cooler than it was outside. So they probably got away with it a bit better than people in, you know, outside environments like, you know, the old greenhouses and things like that. Trying to keep a greenhouse cool this year would have been almost impossible. So we'll see how we go and see what turns up. I might be pleasantly surprised. And that looks good in the sun. What it is, don't ask me. I've got a little group of air plants up there. And that one, whatever it is, turns pink as it comes into bloom. Well, it's actually bloomed now. The blooms only lasted about 3 days, and they're not up to much. Lovely deep purple colour with a yellow bit, but not exactly spectacular. But I don't really grow these for the blooms. I just grow them as an interest, a sideline. But yeah, they do bloom now and again. I mean, that little double one there, you can see both of those have actually bloomed in the past, and the new growth on that one's around the other side where you can't see it. But that one turns a gorgeous sort of salmony pink colour as it heads towards blooming, and then keeps its colour for a while afterwards. And then presumably it'll push out another new growth soon. Come on then, get on with it. And we'll see where we go from there. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, and thanks for everybody who's entered the giveaway. You lot do like making work for me, don't you? The sheer volume of people that have entered for that. Obviously all of the names have got to be put in a spreadsheet to do the draw. A little inundated, I think is the polite expression. But it's gone down to a trickle now, so it's easily manageable, and the beauty of copy and paste came into its own, because obviously it's only the channel names that will go into the actual spreadsheet, so it's just a matter of every comment that entered the draw got a single word acknowledged as their reply. Yeah, because again, that was just copy and paste. So everybody that's entered the draw so far should have acknowledged as their reply, which means I've put them in the spreadsheet and they'll be there. I'll check for duplicates in case there's any sneakies or forgetful people that have gone in there twice before I do the draw. And I'm not quite sure when I'm going to do the draw. My plan was Sunday, but if the people entering the draw sort of stop, then I may well do the draw early. But I can't do it Saturday, and to do it Friday is probably too early. So it'll probably get done on the Sunday. That might even replace my Sunday morning chat, or it can be my Sunday morning chat. So probably Sunday for the draw, and then I'll have to communicate with the winners and you know, get something sorted out about getting a voucher at a nursery done. A bit of help will be required for that little bit, and we'll go from there. And see you next time.